Happiness is not a destination. Happiness is an emotion that we can fall in and out of, and that is so normal. To be happy some days or weeks and not others. Life happens. You cannot be happy all the time. And I think that is equally true of contentment. Well, hello friends. Welcome into the channel. I'm Shauna and I'm excited to have you today. Today's video is honestly a little bit, it's long awaited. I'm going to talk about today my experience with the Mins game. In essence, I tried to declutter 498 things and I'm going to talk about how it went and what I learned. And not just like what I learned about myself, but what I learned about my relationship with stuff and how I've come to think about stuff. I set that as my goal and I actually gave myself a bit of an extended period because I started at the very end of December. And at that time, I really felt the pressure to declutter just from myself. Not just the pressure, but this huge momentum and desire. But the time wasn't there because I was still in the middle of Vlogmas. So I gave myself the permission to go for a couple of days, and then if I couldn't hit it for a couple of days, that would be fine. This video is divided up into two parts. I'm going to talk about my thoughts on the process and the method, and then I'm going to share all about what I learned in this project and my relationship to stuff. So let's talk about how it went. I didn't get to do it in 30 days as I've just mentioned, and I also learned pretty quickly that 498 things would just be too much. There was kind of no way I could declutter that much, and I realized when I got through about what I considered to be half of my things that 498 wouldn't be achievable. So I felt pretty comfortable with the fact that I could probably get to 300. So I put 350 as a stretch goal. And how that went, it went like this. This decluttering method was just not for me. What drew me to this was the fact that it was a really clear process. I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and it's really clear. One thing a day for each day of the month. Or not for each day, that corresponds to the number of that month. And it gives you a strict time frame, which is 30 days. And then it also gives you a goal to attain, which is 498 things. So it kind of took out a lot of the guesswork and the I need to make a plan kind of mentality, especially in a time that I was going into that was just kind of stressful. It makes tackling a big project like decluttering your whole home, regardless of how big your home is, it feels more attainable when you have this system in place. And also what drew me to this was the fact that I was going through my house, just like walking around, and I was seeing stuff that I wanted to declutter, just items here or there, but never did. That is one of the things that made me think about this particular goal or this particular program or style or whatever you want to call it. And I did like that aspect of the project initially, like the first week. I didn't really have to think much about decluttering or really spend a lot of time or, put away a big chunk of time to declutter because I could just do it here and there. And as I opened drawers or walked past stuff, I was just really quickly able to grab what I saw and then put it into my bin. And the bin filled up really quickly just on those everyday walking past you kind of moments. And I think part of the reason why I never chose or picked up these items when I saw them was because it always felt like decluttering was an event or a thing that I just did, like in the sense of today is the day I declutter my wardrobe or I declutter my kitchen or whatever, the case may be. And because it wasn't that moment, it felt like I should save it for that moment so I could do it all at once. When in reality, I think a lesson here is that when you come across a thing that doesn't work for you anymore, that you want to declutter, you can just pick it up and put it in a little bin or whatever you're using. That's all I really need to do. And that's a habit I've taken away from this project. Now, after about day 7, this stopped working for me and it kind of became more of a hassle because I do like to declutter in chunks. I like to get all my wardrobe together and declutter that, or going for books another day, going for makeup on another day, and kind of tackle that as it is and tackle that as a big kind of project. And also after day 7 or 8, more and more time was needed to get through to hit whatever, number it was. Finding 10 pieces even in your makeup collection can be hard and takes time to figure that out. That's not a quick pass-through kind of thing. That's like 40 minutes or an hour of me going through my makeup collection to figure that out. And as, we got on, I needed to, dedicate more and more time to have bigger projects. So then I could declutter my life so I could hit the numbers, which meant that a lot of time was being spent on decluttering. And this wasn't setting aside 10 minutes or even 30 minutes a day. After about day 10, it became, or I guess for me, it was around day 8, really, day 9, where it was more than half an hour. It would be 45 minutes, an hour to go through the different parts of my home. And I abandoned the whole thing altogether so I could declutter by chunks and even do it on, let's say, instead of spending an hour here and an hour there, I could spend 2 or 3 hours on a weekend and have that be the project, do a couple of spaces at once. And that just worked way better. And one of the things that prompted me to do that was, after day 7 is when I got sick. And then I read Marie Kondo's books over those few days that I was in bed, and or the few days that I skipped decluttering, and I was re-inspired by her, and it really made it clear to me that this method wasn't something that I liked, and I wanted to approach it differently. As well, I was choosing things to get rid of instead of choosing things to keep. And her book made it pretty clear to me that I didn't really have a great criteria for decluttering things. And so by deciding what was going, it was often just one of two things. I'm not using this anymore, or I don't want the thing. Those were the categories early on. And my thinking stopped there. I didn't push past that at all. And when I read Marie Kondo's book, I have a whole video on it. Not necessarily how it affected my decluttering, but my thoughts on her process. When I was able to apply it to, you get to decide what you want to keep, it gave me a clear criteria of spark joy, which works for me most of the time for most things. And I was able to pick things that make me happy, that bring me joy, especially in especially in clothing and accessories, all of that really draws to me there, especially. And I really appreciate what she says about the functional things. The functional thing can save you time because you have it. And if you didn't, you would be spending more time and the whole process would be more frustrating having to do that thing or that job without that thing. And so even though my pots and pans don't spark joy in the same way as this sweater does, and it's the entire reason I'm wearing it in this video, I believe what she says about functionality. And so in picking the things that I got to stay made me realize that what was leaving and what I had chosen to leave, already in this process, I went to reevaluate it because I didn't think more about, well, why am I not wearing that thing, or why am I not using that thing? And so saying I don't use this thing anymore really became a cover-up of boredom. I'm bored of this thing, therefore I'm not using it. And I no longer use this thing as a criteria that a lot of people use to declutter their stuff, when in reality, we think that we're becoming more minimalist, or at least I don't want to speak for you, I guess I speak for me. I think I'm becoming more discerning and more minimalist, when in reality, all I'm doing is just getting rid of things I'm bored of, and I'm not learning to live with things when I'm bored of them. Oh, boy. I just filmed a video on my spring wardrobe and talked about headbands and how I wanted to buy new ones. So I need to take my own advice that I don't just need new ones because I'm bored of the old ones. And is it boredom? I don't know. That's not for here and now. So would I do this method again? Maybe for a week. I don't think I would do this again for more than 10 days, because then the time commitment just increases. That it just doesn't match what I wanted to do or what I had intended for it to be. So I could see myself doing a decluttering challenge of, let's say, 7 to 10 days, and you do one thing a day, or that corresponds with the number, or I declutter the number of things that correspond with the number of that day. I would do that, but no more than 10. And the boredom thing really opened my eyes. And I really as well come to see what I'm using and what I'm not. And when I'm not using something, or let's say I want a new book as an example, I feel like I'm much more in my head in a good way about, well, why do you want a new book? Why aren't your new ones, like, why aren't they good enough? And getting more in the practice of evaluating boredom. I think that is a huge takeaway from this, is questioning my own boredom. Now, in terms of what I learned, and also my relationship with stuff, the thing I learned the most about is how I value my things, and being able to see what has mattered to me and what the most important features of a product are, the most important features of an item. And there's a lot of things in our lives that function like white noise, that we don't count as stuff, that we don't even consider as stuff. Things like bobby pins, thumbtacks, or like the tacks you put in to like a bulletin board or a cork board, things like that. Even things like socks and gloves, winter accessories, small kitchen appliances or gadgets like even straws, or I don't have a garlic press, but things like that. And there's a lot of things that hair clips are a big one. Hair clips are things that I didn't really value, even though I spent my money on. And what I realized is that there are 3 main categories, or 3 main qualifications that I consider something's value or place in my home on. Let me elaborate. So number 1 is space, the room a thing takes up. So I will value something or see it as an item, see it as something that I care about, that has value, and am interested in counting that thing as something I decluttered if it takes up a lot of space. These can be things like just even containers themselves. That introduced a really interesting question of, if you get rid of a container but not the stuff, do you care about, or which one do you care about more? Do you care about the container because it took up the space, or do you care about the stuff because it's what's in it? And usually, or in the past, I'd only considered one of those 2 things. In reality, you put stuff in the container, so the container matters too. I don't know if that one makes sense, but that was a conundrum that I faced. The second, and I think this one matters a lot to me, or I was interested in counting this thing out and saw it as a thing because of the money that I spent on an item. So I'm more inclined to count expensive things as an item out, or just even things I spent my money on versus a free thing. One thing that came up was like a shoebox versus a IKEA storage box that I paid for. Both of those things do the exact same job. One is a little bit bigger than the other, but they still take up space, and they both fulfill the same purpose. And in the past, I never would have counted the shoebox because it was, in essence, free, opposed to the IKEA box, which I paid for. And so I have counted things that I paid for, more so than things that I haven't, or things that might have been factored into the price of a thing, like let's say a pasta jar. Companies that produce pasta sauce don't give away a jar for free. It's counted in the price of the good that I pay for it. And then I declutter it, or when I'm done with the jar and I've had all the sauce, you recycle the jar when you've paid for that packaging. So the last thing is weight or quantity. By that, I mean, if I owned one piece of paper, I rarely ever counted it as a thing. But if I had a stack of papers, that was a thing. Or if I had a big bag of elastics or big bag of what have you, hair accessories, things like that, then it became a thing. Whereas the individual thing really mattered. And these are really interesting qualifications. And I don't view everything equally. Like stuff is not stuff. That really bothered me because if you think about it, let me just take paper as an example. When you buy paper to put in your printer, even if it's recycled, the average ream is 500 sheets. Each sheet is factored into the price of the piece of paper. The same thing with bobby pins and the same thing with like hair clips. And while none of those things are a ton of money, paper you can buy between $5 and $10. Hair clips, probably the same. I don't know, probably spent maybe $4 to $8 on a pack of, let's say, 15, something like that. So none of those things are very expensive, and I didn't really value any of them anyways. When there was just one, I would often just recycle the one piece of paper. Sometimes I would put it back in the printer, but not always. And so the one thing I didn't ever really value, even though it's all those things that make up the price of the good. I was talking to my friend about this, and we were talking about hair accessories, and I was talking about elastics, that you buy elastics, and whenever I go buy a pack of, let's say, 50, I'm always surprised at how expensive they are. But when I get them in my possession, I never take good care of them. I lose them all the time. Like, I don't just have one place where I put elastics and I'll lose them. And I was like, well, imagine if you only had one elastic. That, like, the amount of care that I would put into that item would be very different. It came to be really clear the amount of things in my life that I didn't value and I just kind of saw as white noise. And that has become even clearer through my contentment updates as I've come to see how hard on my things that I am. And it's come to bother me how I have viewed and treated a lot of things in my life. The last, I guess, interesting observation or what I learned is pairs, or is about pairs. So things like shoes, gloves, earrings, things of that nature. I ended up having a long conversation with my partner and actually with many of you on Instagram about many of these ideas, but this one in particular. Do you count a pair of gloves as one item or two? When you buy them, like you buy them as a pair, they come together and they are functionless really without the other. You can maybe make mismatched earrings work, but definitely not shoes and probably not gloves. And this whole thing got kicked off because I found one rogue glove. It was just one. Its pair was not anywhere. I still haven't found it. Like the pair just up and disappeared. Maybe I just found the one months or if not years ago and then decluttered it and then found the other one. That was a catalyst to make me think about this idea because, one is functionless without the other. However, when you lose one, it's very clear that you have two things. That's not just one thing. Yes, it is functionless, but now you're ending up with one thing that you are literally going to declutter if you can't repurpose because you only have one. So it really made how I view pairs a little bit differently. And also when we buy pairs, that's factored into the price, but also I think I had failed to consider the materials, the cost, and the labor that goes into producing a pair of shoes instead of just one shoe. It's double the waste, double the energy, double the product, double the material, double the cost. Now that I've had some space away from this decluttering experience, I ended up decluttering 350 things. I did meet the goal. And in some ways, that's the least interesting part of this. I feel overall unsettled by the experience because I still think at the end of the day, I own a lot of clothes. And clothes are one of the things that I tend to buy a lot of. And this whole experience left me feeling really satisfied with my makeup, as well as my books and my clothes for a while. I got rid of garbage bags filled with clothes that I was repacking them. And as I was decluttering them first, I felt this sickening feeling in my stomach and overall disgust with myself. And I was talking to my friend about this, and I was saying, you know what? Maybe I'm going to keep one of these things so I can keep that feeling of disgust hanging in my closet to remind myself of this moment, because I felt like it would go away, that I would lose this feeling and this feeling of disgust. And like, how could I have ever thought that this was not enough? Like, how dare I? I was right. Within a month, I'm already looking at new things, looking at the next thing, and am wanting more. And am wanting newer things. And not just in the sense of I want new things or I want more, but in the sense of that feeling of disgust is gone. That feeling of how could I have ever thought this wasn't enough has waned a lot. I look at my drawers that are filled with stuff, and that disgust is coming back, but in a bit of a different way. Like, you are so, I guess I'm being accusatory here, but like, you are so ungrateful. How dare you? How dare you? I think when it comes to my clothes and I look at where I was a year ago, the number of things I was baseline interested in before I, checked myself was not as much. I just feel unsettled, almost wanting anything after that experience and decluttering so much. But also after decluttering so much and then also coming here and buying some new things for this place, the place feels like, yes, some things are empty or not as full, like my closet. My life doesn't feel like, my things don't feel less. I don't feel the feeling of less, or like I have less things. And if I lived in the older space, I don't know that I would have had that feeling either. So in some ways, it feels like decluttering 350 things almost made no difference in terms of how my space feels. I wanted to just go back to touch on the valuing free things and valuing things based on price. This is kind of interweaving with what I'm saying now. So when I was thinking about how cost shapes or price shapes how I value or perceive things, I kind of thought that I was above that, in the sense of, I'm not somebody who devalues things because they're less money, or valuing something more if it's luxury, because a bag, well, they're not all made equally. A bag, like a Louis Vuitton bag, functions in the same way as like a Matt and Nat bag. Yes, one is a higher quality, but they function the same. And so we value luxury in essence because it's more expensive. It's a status symbol. And we live in a kind of society that teaches us to value money and wealth and things that can be associated with it or symbolize it. And I was very disheartened to learn that I'm not above this valuation. And I've devalued things that have cost less, and I have valued things that have cost more. I guess, I don't know, I want to say part of that is human nature, but I don't want to believe that. And the reason why I bring this up now is because there are things at both ends of the spectrum, the cheap and the affordable, and the expensive and the high end, that I've decluttered. And I've decluttered both of them. And so while I have bought into valuing one more than the other, I haven't kept one because it was expensive, or kept one because it was affordable. I've become bored and disenchanted with things across the board. As I come off this feeling and reflecting on the men's game and, in essence, the experience of decluttering 350 things, I'm ultimately glad I chose Marie Kondo so I can really learn to love and appreciate my things and find that love in them and find that appreciation in them and work on espousing isn't the right word. and work on expressing those things of my stuff and being thankful and grateful for what I have and really working on appreciating my stuff. I don't know that I would have started that journey in this way without Marie Kondo, because I think her book really aligns with my contentment year, and her view really aligns with my contentment year. And it was the book that went, hey, I really think that you should prioritize things in your life that spark joy and really work on figuring that out. And while that might have been my goal all along, I had no practice of figuring that out, or that practice of implementing it or starting to actually do the thing. It gave me a reason to do the thing. It gave me criteria to use. And so I'm grateful for Marie Kondo's book for, starting that and getting that out there. This has kind of put a wrench in the contentment year for a couple of reasons. The first is that I, in my last update, said, I want to spend more time valuing myself and doing contentment of the self. And I do think that is important, 100%. And I want to spend more time and energy there, and putting my time and energy towards myself and really practicing the contentment of the self, 100%. Okay, so I heard this quote about happiness where it was something like, having a goal to be happy is kind of pointless, or maybe something we shouldn't strive for, because happiness isn't something you arrive at. Like, you work all your life and eventually one day you feel happy and then you're just happy for the rest of your life. Happiness is not a destination. Happiness is an emotion that we can fall in and out of, and that is so normal. To be happy some days or weeks and not others. Life happens. You cannot be happy all the time. And I think that is equally true of contentment. I think I was viewing contentment as something that I can arrive at, that it's a destination, and then I'm just like content and I'm there and I got it. And this contentment project really showed me that it's like happiness in the sense of, unless you work at it all the time, just like happiness, you're not going to arrive. And there are going to be moments where you are discontent and where you're not as happy, or where you want to buy more things because you want to buy more things, or you're feeling spendy and you need practices in place to help you when you're feeling that way. And that is a big lesson to learn here, and one that makes me feel a little bit sad in a way. I thought that I could just arrive, when that's really a naive belief. And it's all about establishing good habits here too. Just like I've talked about in the no-buy, in establishing habits of contentment that can help us keep that at the front of mind, and also help us when we're not at that place, when we're not content, when we're feeling discontent. And while that's an important revelation, it's one that I wish wasn't true. So while on the surface this project was about decluttering stuff, that almost becomes the least important element of this project. And I feel like I'm still processing it and trying to honestly milk this experience for every ounce of realization or thought or ideas that I can get out of it, and really get the most out of that experience. I think there's just more work to do. So that's the video. I would love to hear your thoughts. If you've also done the min scheme, or if you've done some decluttering recently, I would love to hear that as well. Thank you so much for being here today and hanging out with me in this video. I'd love to have you here. If you like this content, you want to follow along with the Contentment project, and all the little projects I'm doing this year to try and help me feel more content in my life with who I am and what I have and where I'm at, I would love to have you along for the journey. So thanks so much, and I hope to see you again around here soon. Bye.